Hey everybody, welcome to the Calitraveler podcast show. I'm your host, Paul. Once again, welcome to the Calitraveler podcast show. I'm your host, Paul. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 12 of the Calitraveler podcast show. This week's episode, we'll be answering one of the biggest questions. San Francisco, is it a dream come true, or is it a nightmare? Being from San Francisco, California, I often get asked about California all the time, especially by some of the students at my university. These students, when they ask me about California, they're like, "You're from LA? Are you from LA? Is it near LA?" San Francisco is in Northern California. So in California, we have two areas, Northern California and Southern California. Now, we as locals, we call Northern California NorCal, and people in Southern California call it SoCal. So NorCal and SoCal, I'm from a neighborhood called Lower Pack Heights / Western Addition, which borders Japantown, which is actually part of Western Addition, Pacific Heights, Nob Hill, and the Tender Knob District. Tender Knob District is basically where the Nob Hill neighborhood and the Tenderloin District neighborhoods meet. So they call it Tender Knob because it's kind of in the middle. Now, if you're ever wanting to live in San Francisco, it is a beautiful city, but I am going to start this off by giving you the share of its problems. Yes, San Francisco has an issue with the homeless. It's very unfortunate. Some of those people aren't bad, though. Some of them are just in bad situations. And some of them, unfortunately, made decisions that got them to where they're at. I would blame part of it due to the COVID pandemic. The homeless situation is bad, yes. Do we have a problem with drugs? Yes. However, those issues don't exist everywhere in the city. It's only in certain parts of the city. And those areas happen to be the Tenderloin District and part of downtown San Francisco. That's where a lot of the homeless are at in the city. Especially Tenderloin District. Tenderloin District is a dangerous area. I do not recommend going there. Tenderloin is right on the borders of Market Street between Polk and Taylor Street. This area would be part of the Tenderloin District. In this area, you've got to be very careful going through at night. It is starting to get cleaned up. That is the good thing. It is starting to get cleaned up. People are starting to seek resources that the city is providing. And luckily, there are volunteers that are going out and helping people that are struggling. But other than the Tenderloin District and Bayview, San Francisco, for the most part, is a great place to live. Being from Lower Pacific Heights, I actually happen to live in a safe neighborhood. It's very quiet. What I love about my neighborhood is the fact that it is like 10 minutes away from downtown. And you can take the Muni. Muni is the public transportation system in the city of San Francisco. Yes, you can drive a car in San Francisco, but if you're not going to be actually leaving the city of San Francisco and going to places like Oakland or San Jose, there's really no need for a car because public transportation in the San Francisco Bay Area is by far the best. In San Francisco, you can walk, you can take Uber. Yes, you can still get a taxi. We do have taxis in San Francisco. And there's also, for you people who love to ride scooters, mopeds, we do have mopeds. But there's this app called Scoop. And I used to use it all the time when I was back home. It's an app where you can rent electric scooters on the streets. And it's like $3 for 30 minutes, and then it's 10 cents each additional minute after the 30 minutes. And I used to use this every single weekend when I would do my own tradition called Sushi Saturday. And Sushi Saturday is exactly what it is. I go out, I eat sushi. And I would always rent a scoot instead of driving to Japantown. I could either drive there or I could walk there. But during the summers, it can get hot in San Francisco. It can get like in the upper 80s degrees Fahrenheit, which would be around upper 20s Celsius. So generally I'll take a scoot and I just ride it to the parking garage in Japantown. Now the cool thing about scoot is if scoot that you rented doesn't have enough battery power and you get it to a parking garage, that ride is free. Obviously they're going to compensate you. In Japantown, there is a mall called Japan Center. Great place to go to on Saturdays, but it gets super packed on the weekends. And the place that I always go to for Sushi Saturday when I'm back home is I go to a place called Kuishinbo, which is owned by May and William Lee. So if you're ever in San Francisco, please go check them out. Amazing people and amazing food. They also have a place in Japantown, Japan Center, that serves Dragon's Breath, which is cereal that is frozen in liquid nitrogen. And the place to get Dragon's Breath is called Chocolate Chair. Another sushi place that I recommend going to as well is called Kushisuru. Kushisuru is good as well. Both Kuishinbo and Kushisuru are great in price, because there are some places in San Francisco where it's a bit pricey for sushi. We also have the Fillmore District, and the Fillmore District, they always have the Fillmore Jazz Festival every summer, but unfortunately last year it was canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In my area, you can also go to Lafayette Park. Lafayette Park is a nice little park. San Francisco, even it is a very dense city, San Francisco does have its share of nature. And the amazing part about its share of nature, being in my area, there's a park within every 3 or 4 square blocks in the city. But the biggest park in all of San Francisco is Golden Gate Park. And Golden Gate Park is basically the West Coast version of Central Park in New York City. They have the Japanese Garden. Beautiful place. I used to go there all the time whenever I was taking a break from doing classes or driving Uber. There's also Stowe Lake. Stowe Lake is a great place to go to as well. Haven't been there since 2018. And at the end of Golden Gate Park, you've got the beautiful beaches. And one of the most famous beaches in San Francisco is Baker Beach. And the reason that Baker Beach is so famous is because Baker Beach is right next to the Golden Gate Bridge, the icon of the San Francisco Bay Area. From Baker Beach, you can also go to Land's End. And Land's End is a viewpoint, and it's high above a cliff, and you can see all the Pacific Ocean. It is an amazing sight to see. It's just sad in the summertime to go there because it's always foggy. And if you're going to move to San Francisco, we have a name for the fog. It's called Carl. Don't ask me why it's called Carl the Fog. We just call it Carl the Fog. And if you go east of the Golden Gate Bridge, you can go to Fort Point, which is a historic U.S. Army fort. Another place you can go to that's a historic Army fort is Fort Mason. Fort Mason is in an area called Fisherman's Wharf, and Fort Mason is home to the Fort Mason International Hostel, which is actually an infirmary. An infirmary is another word for hospital. You go down from Fort Mason, you walk down a hill, you end up being in Fisherman's Wharf, and there's a bunch of little shops down at Fisherman's Wharf. If you are a chocolate fanatic, we've got some of the best chocolate you'll ever have in the city and perhaps in your entire life. Ghirardelli chocolate is from San Francisco. Yes, they have an In-N-Out burger in San Francisco on Jefferson Street. FYI, because San Francisco has a little bit of a high sales tax, it's a little bit more expensive than if you go to any other city within the Bay Area. If you want a good little sushi place, I recommend going to Flying Ninja Sushi. It's a little pricey, but good taste. And then we've got Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum. We have Bubba Gump Shrimp. If you like Forrest Gump, you'll love Bubba Gump Shrimp. Down at Fisherman's Wharf, they have a very famous arcade called Musée Mécanique, which is the mechanical museum in French. And Musée Mécanique is a gaming arcade. Arcade games from the late 19th century, the late 1800s, early 1900s to today. And if you keep walking from Musée Mécanique, you then stumble across the world famous San Francisco's Pier 39. I used to work at Pier 39 4 years ago. I worked for a company called California Market and Jewelry. And at that store, we sold Native American jewelry. Pier 39 is also home to a bunch of famous restaurants. One of the restaurants that's really popular is Boudin. Boudin is a place that serves like clam chowder. And one specialty in San Francisco when it comes to food is the clam chowder in a sourdough bread bowl. But the best sourdough clam chowder bread bowls, in my opinion, is from a restaurant called Chowders. If you're on the first level of Pier 39, you'll be able to take a glimpse at the world famous sea lions that have been hanging out at Pier 39 since the 1980s. And they're a popular tourist attraction. They may look cute, but don't get anywhere near them, because they will bite. When you keep walking down Embarcadero, you'll end up seeing the San Francisco Ferry Building, and the Ferry Building has all the ferries that take you around San Francisco Bay. There's also a farmer's market there as well. A lot to do in downtown, amazing restaurants, do grocery shopping in Chinatown. I'm somebody who believes in supporting local businesses, so I would go and buy fruits and vegetables from there. Many great restaurants in San Francisco Chinatown. I personally love Yuet Li. Yuet Li is a restaurant in Chinatown on Stockton Street. There are several hundred restaurants in Chinatown. Because you gotta remember, Chinatown is 11 square blocks. It is also the oldest Chinatown in the United States. Some of you might think that Chinatown Manhattan is the oldest, but it's not. It's actually San Francisco Chinatown. Chinatown Manhattan happens to be a bit larger than San Francisco's Chinatown. If you love dim sum, the best place to get dim sum in all of Chinatown would be New Asia. New Asia is off of Stockton and Pacific. If you're in Chinatown, if you want to be more like a local when you're down there, I recommend staying on the Stockton Street side of Chinatown. If you go on the Grant Street side, that's where a lot of the tourist shops are at. So definitely stay on the Stockton Street side if you really want to have the locals experience of Chinatown. And then we've got the Sunset Districts. So you have the Inner Sunset, Outer Sunset. Inner Richmond, Outer Richmond. The Outer Sunset and Outer Richmond districts are the two districts of San Francisco that are right on the... If you're ever in the Outer Sunset district, I recommend going to a place called Java Beach Cafe. It's off of 48th Avenue and La Playa. Best smoked salmon bagels you'll ever have. And their French vanilla coffee is amazing. Now, if you're into sports, we do have baseball. San Francisco Giants. Oracle Park is right off of King Street. But if you want to get out of San Francisco, I recommend going to places like the Marin Headlands. Marin Headlands is the hills that you see right across from the Golden Gate Bridge. That's a great place to go to. You can walk across the Golden Gate Bridge. If you want to go to the East Bay and go to places like Oakland, Berkeley, Union City, Hayward, or down to San Jose, I recommend taking a train called BART, which is a Bay Area Rapid Transit. If you're wanting to travel along the peninsula of San Francisco, so there's the East Bay, and then there is San Francisco, and then the peninsula. The city of San Francisco is on top of a peninsula, and there's a train system called Caltrain. Caltrain goes from San Francisco all the way down to Gilroy, which is south of San Jose, and it's known as the garlic capital of the world. So is San Francisco a dream come true or a nightmare? Why don't you come to San Francisco and find out for yourself? The cost of the fare depends on your destination. Podcast can be heard weekly on my YouTube channel, so subscribe to Calitraveler 93, as well as liking my Facebook page, Calitraveler 93, and the podcast will be available on Spotify and other platforms.